Bringing my guest for this hour, joining me now, former Department of Justice senior attorney and former federal prosecutor, Tammy Allison. Tammy, great to see you. Thanks for being on the show tonight. I do want to wish you a Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Michael. Thank you for having me.
All right, great to have you on the show. Let's start off by just talking about this case in general. As a former prosecutor, watching this prosecution work, the mounds and mounds of evidence they have, your thoughts on the case that they've been presenting thus far?
I think the prosecution is doing a great job, Michael. The fact that there's so much at play here, not only the fire, but the exit wounds that we heard from the individual who conducted the autopsy, from a firearm, the gunshots. It's very gruesome, and it's important for the prosecution to take their time to connect the dots for the jury, and as we like to say here, make it make sense so that when they present their arguments, the jury can find beyond a reasonable doubt that this defendant is in fact guilty. I am curious to see how the defense is going to combat against this very strong evidence against the defendant.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wanted to ask you about that. You know, there've been some cross-examinations. Some of my guests have termed it surgical. They're going in, they have usually 3 or 4 questions. They're trying to nitpick certain things that you can sort of check the idea that they're going to check those things off when they make their closing argument. They've basically gone the reasonable doubt route. Your thoughts on a possible defense here? I mean, if you were representing this guy, not sure where else they could go.
You know, Michael, I think the best thing that the defense can do with these types of cases where the evidence is so strong is, like you said, to attack the reasonable doubt and the fact that that is the standard here that the prosecution has to meet. And that's a very high burden, just to remind our viewers. Beyond a reasonable doubt is what the jury has to find in order for this defendant to be convicted, to be found guilty. So the defense is just going to poke holes in the evidence that's presented, whereas sometimes we see defense counsel ask more leading questions to direct the attention to the jury elsewhere if in fact the evidence is not as strong, maybe to point out some types of circumstantial evidence, something that isn't as tangible as the evidence that we have here in this case.
Yeah, it's extremely tangible. That's a great word for it. There was a little tidbit today, I just asked Chanley about it, that I thought perhaps could be a little ray of hope, a little tidbit for the defense. You know, they were talking about the items used to dismember the body. They were talking about DNA found in and around the home. They had some on the fireplace. They had some on some shoes. He lived in the house. Those things, that wouldn't be odd. You could make the argument that doesn't really mean anything. But they didn't find any on the actual items used to, let's say, dismember the body, right? So now we don't know about the gun yet. I'm sure they're going to bring that evidence out later if they have it. But that's something, for instance, that the defense could argue in closing, saying, hey, look, you know, they could find this stuff in the house, the DNA on the fireplace, and of course in shoes, but it's not on the main things used to dismember the body. That's the type of thing that you can use to maybe build some blocks for reasonable doubt, no?
Yes, absolutely, Michael. That is what they could do. But at the same time, if the prosecution plays their cards right, they're going to be like, well, who in their right mind is all up on a fireplace whenever we have bodies that were burned in that said fireplace? Any person who is avoiding trying to get caught, they're going to probably clean the weapons that were used to dismember the individuals that they're killing. So I don't think that it's that far-fetched to say that there's no DNA on the tools used to dismember the bodies. But yes, the individual did live in the house, so it's not uncommon for DNA to be found within the house up and through it. But that fireplace is very strong. And if the prosecution, again, goes ahead and lays out all of the evidence they have without missing any little bit, just because they have strong evidence elsewhere, it doesn't mean that they should not present some of the weaker evidence that they have as well in order to pile on so that they can reach that very high burden of beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was the next thing I was going to get to, the fact that there is so much evidence for the prosecution. Some of it, like today, they had an expert on who wanted to make sure that they understood by video analysis that there was a fire burning in the Halderson home. Seemed like a lot of time and expense for something that was a real small part of the puzzle here. There were so many other things that are much stronger. But I think it's important to note the point that you make, that even the weaker evidence, prosecutors don't want to make any missteps here. You bring it all in. If it takes 3 weeks, a case that looks like a slam dunk, then it takes 3 weeks, right?
Absolutely, because we've seen defense counsel pounce on those types of things whenever prosecutors get a little too cocky, like, okay, my evidence is so strong, but the defense can go and poke holes at some of those weaker arguments, and the jury pays attention to everything. So it's very important that the prosecution, no matter what case it is, to present all of the evidence. Maybe not spend so much time on some of those weaker arguments, but all of it is important so that the defense cannot poke holes and they can prove beyond a reasonable doubt.
All right, and you heard we also have a case of COVID-19. The defendant has tested positive for COVID-19. There'll be a hearing tomorrow morning. In your mind, what will go on in that hearing, and what are some of the possibilities that could come of it?
You know what, Michael, at this point, given the CDC guidelines, who knows what's going to happen? They might just be like, we all going to catch it eventually, or they may go virtual. I'm not sure what's going to happen with the hearing, but, the defendant has a right to, feel well and get his health looked at and checked out. But at the same time, not only does the defendant have a constitutional right to a speedy trial, the public at large has that right as well. So I don't know if the judge is going to delay the trial or postpone it for a later date, which could be, in some situations, months or years.
Yeah, we'll find out tomorrow morning what's going to come of this breaking news. All right, Tammy, stand by. We're going to take a break right now. When we come back, new charges for the case in the stepmom of a little girl in New Hampshire. Why prosecutors dropped one count and then added 9 others.